Allen. Welcome to round number 13 here at Grand Prix Pittsburgh this weekend. Ray Bartholdi and Andrew Brown hanging out with you in the booth. For this round of Standard here, Zach Allen on Esper Control versus Mike Sigrist on White-Blue Control. So pick your flavor of Control. Here you go. Make your choice now. Which one do you like, Andrew?
Definitely in game one, I think I got to give Mike the edge. He just has less, dead cards in the matchup. But Zach kind of starting off with one of the best cards in the Control mirror, which is Search for Azcanta.
So why is this card so good specifically in this match?
Because neither player is going to put a lot of pressure on the other one. So this search just filtering Zach's draws constantly is going to be so crucial.
All right, so Zach Allen able to stick the first card that's going to make a difference potentially in this match, but we've got a blink of an eye here from Mike Sigrist.
Is this main phase or end of Zach's turn? It looked like the end of Zach's turn, yeah. Yeah, just as we can see, Mike giving a lot of respect to that Search for Azcanta because, he would definitely love to trade it for a counterspell if Zach tries to go for it again.
All right, we'll see what decision Zach wants to make here. We saw a match earlier today with Zach playing our only player that had no ties and no losses, which was Jack Kiefer earlier on in the day. Zach Allen now remains the only player who has yet to take a loss in the tournament. He does have a tie, though, as you can see up in his record at the top of your screen.
Yeah, Zach looking really good this weekend. I think he's nearly locked if he can get a win out of this match, and that'll just make his top 8 great because he'll probably be in first place.
All right, so draw go is going to be the name of the game here. And it has been at least pretty much thus far for both players.
Yeah, so looking at these deck lists, there are a ton of dead cards in this matchup. So for Mike, he has 4 Seal Away, 3 Settle the Wreckage, and Fumigate that don't really do much, while Zach has 4 Fatal Push and 2 Cast Down that don't do much.
All right, there's a Search for Azcanta. Take 2 here from Zach Allen. Cast out from Mike Sigrist.
Yeah, that's generally a pretty favorable trade for Mike, given that both players don't have very many permanents, and when you can use like a pseudo removal spell on a very high quality permanent like Search for Azcanta, that's always great.
We're going to commit here.
So it's the commit targeting the cast out. So this lets Zach have access to his Search for Azcanta again.
All right, so here we go. Search for Azcanta, giving Zach the first opportunity to take a look at the top of his deck, and underway.
Yeah, so sometimes control matchups really come down to who kind of plays more lands, and right now it looks like neither player actually has any lands, which is definitely going to favor Zach as he has this Search for Azcanta going.
When you're watching control mirrors like this as well, are we waiting kind of just for that moment when somebody tries to go for it and there's a counter war?
Yeah, and that moment is normally dictated by who forces the action or who actually has more mana to fight back with. So in this case, I definitely got to give the edge to Zach here.
All right, so cast out take 2 here from Mike Sigrist on the Search for Azcanta yet again.
But yeah, in this particular spot, Zach does have more lands out, so I would kind of give him the edge right now. I've played a ton of control mirrors in my day, and it always definitely came down to who plays more lands.
That's just so interesting to hear from a non-control perspective. That's what's going on.
Yeah, that is the thing that matters. It's actually really funny. Back in the Khans era of blue and black control, where the finisher was Pearl Lake Ancient.
Oh, yeah.
In the mirror match, it was actually whoever played the Pearl Lake Ancient first lost the match. Because then you would spend all your dead cards, like Hero's Downfall, on it, and then you'd have to pick up your lands, and then eventually, then you don't have as many lands to fight back with when the other person goes for theirs. So that's how that one was worked out.
Oh, Pearl Lake Ancient. What a cutie.
Yeah, card very near and dear to my heart, and I generally really enjoy making like new control finishers for future Magic sets, and I like to kind of take this card as inspiration for a lot of them because I like the paying of resources. Like I have to discard some cards for Chromium, or I have to discard cards with Nezahal while I'm still trying to like keep par and kill my opponent at the same time.
New Chromium coming, by the way. Chromium the Mutable.
Yeah, Chromium the Mutable. Very cool card.
All right, so we've managed to resolve a second search for Azcanta here for Zach Allen. We're going to put an Essence Scatter into the graveyard because that's useless.
Yeah. And looking at both players' deck lists, Zach and Mike both have only 2 copies of Search for Azcanta in their main deck. So Zach is really going to want to try and save his copy because his other one's in the graveyard right now. But Mike has that Field of Ruin just in case that Azcanta flips into the Sunken Ruin.
All right, here's a Glimmer of Genius. All right, it's good.
Yeah, normally you don't really want to counter like the middling draw spells like Glimmer of Genius. Like you normally want to save them for the big ones like Pull from Tomorrow. Generally, the only time I would really counter a draw spell in a control mirror is probably like post board when all of our cards cost a lot less and there are less dead cards overall. So like if I have Duress and I have Negate in my deck, I'm more likely to want to counter the draw spells.
All right, so both players with infinite cards in hand here.
Yeah, it looks like we're on Zach's turn, so he's most likely going to have to discard, I would imagine, some amount of Fatal Pushes / cast downs. Looking at his hand, though, I can see him rifling through it really fast, though. He has a Teferi, a Scarab God. Doesn't look like he has too many blanks in his hand at the moment, but I'm assuming Mike has a ton of counter magic for this Teferi.
All right, I also love in these matches how the cards seem to hover above the battlefield for quite a while before we decide what happens to them. There's Teferi on the stack.
I definitely love seeing your reactions to these little nuggets of control v control knowledge, because I don't. How many of these kind of games have you even played before?
I mean, not a lot. I fully admit that this is not my style of Magic, and that's one of the beautiful things about Magic is it doesn't have to be.
Right.
My podcast co-host Megan, though, this is her jam.
Oh, this is her jam? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, she's over here. We can get her on here.
Get over here.
Yeah, so it looks like there was a counter war where 3 disallows were used. 1 for Zach and 2 for Mike. Another thing to think about during control mirrors is to actually just count the cards in your opponent's deck in terms of like how many copies of a certain card have they used. So Zach should definitely be thinking, okay, Mike has used 2 disallows currently, so there's only a possibility of 2 more that I have to play around. And
you have to be pretty judicious as well with when you're going to use cards like disallow.
Right. Like, for example, I'm pretty sure Mike never wants to counter that Glimmer of Genius with the disallow, given how precious the disallows are in the matchup.
Okay, so here's that flip into Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. Field of Ruin, though, on the battlefield for Sigrist.
Yeah, it seems likely that he'll want to hit that Azcanta the Sunken Ruin as fast as he can, because he's kind of in a spot here, Zach's kind of in a spot here where if his Azcanta was unchecked, he could actually just kind of card Mike out of the game, because Mike hasn't played any card advantage spells as of yet.
Okay, so there is Field of Ruin activation targeting Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. Zach Allen thinking a good while about this.
Yeah, I definitely thinks he wants to use it. Or he'll just lose it.
Well, he's going to get an island, as is Sigrist.
I know it was used pretty early on in the game, but let's not forget that Zach still has that copy of Commit to Memory in his graveyard. And since he is the only one with access to Torrential Gearhulk in this matchup, he can freely flash it back or just fully invest and cast it.
How about another Field of Ruin here from Sigrist?
Yeah, that's one of the draws to...
Hello, Commit to Memory. Ah, there we go.
Good effort, Reed. Yeah, that's one of the draws to actually playing the 2-color build of the control deck, is because you can definitely play more copies of Field of Ruin. Because I'm looking at the deck list right now, and Zach only has 2, while Mike is able to play 3.
So here's another attempt at a Teferi. This one is hanging around, at least for the moment. And we're going to get to draw. Although Sigrist does have a Disallow in hand. And other tricks up his sleeve, no doubt.
So, looks like before Zach is able to untap those lands with the Teferi, Mike is going to cast out, most likely targeting the Teferi.
So why would he want to use something like this here? It's just because this is a target that I have for my cast out, right? As opposed to just doing a hard counter.
Well, generally you want to save your counters when you have to use them. So cast out is normally there are just less targets in Zach's deck because there are more spells than actual permanents. And the distinction I'm making there is like spells as an instance and sorceries versus permanents like Teferi.
All right, so here's one of the moments that we've been talking about. The fight has ended. The dust has settled. We had a negate, a disallow, and another disallow over that cast out on that Teferi, and Teferi stays around.
Yeah, it's definitely possible that, Mike is kind of running low on cards. When I say running low, he probably has about 5 or 6 in his hand, but Zach's still at a healthy 7 cards, I think, and Mike has actually used 3 disallows this game, so he's running pretty low on hard counters. Because generally these blue-white decks only play 2 to 4 disallows and not many other hard counters.
See a pull from tomorrow in Sigrist's hand as well.
Yeah, that being one of the big kind of draw haymakers that Zach wants to counter. But I don't think Zach is going to kind of leave his shields down to let Mike have a turn where he can pull and have counter backup.
All right, so here it is, pull from tomorrow from Mike.
This is interesting. Pull for 4, not that big, so it's not really threatening Zach that much. I think 4 random cards from Mike's deck are definitely about worth 1 counter spell from Zach, so I actually like him letting this resolve.
All right, so Sigrist adds 4 more cards to his grip here. Still 4 lands left up. Make that 5. These players aware too that time is of the essence in these
exactly
matchups.
And it's got to be on Mike's mind because, in Game 2, Mike doesn't have a lot of ways to win the game very quickly. His only reliable source of winning the game is Lyra Dawnbringer and Baral Chief of Compliance. So if he goes down a game here early on and then doesn't have enough time to win 2 games, it doesn't look very good for him.
All right, so this Teferi ticks ever upward here, up to 7 for Zach.
Very close to the ultimate. Yeah, and Zach just keeps playing a land every turn, which is exactly what he wants to be doing. Just land pass.
Land equals opportunity to cast more of my counter spells.
Wonder what Mike's going for here. Oh, it could be another pull from tomorrow.
Pull? Yep, pull from tomorrow number 2 here.
Yeah, and I think, if Zach is going to let pull for 4 resolve on 1 turn, he's most likely going to let it resolve on another turn as well. Because like I said, I think 4 random cards from Mike's deck are about worth 1 counter spell from Zach, just because how precious those counter spells are.
cast out.
With the Teferi on 7, I think this is most likely worth fighting for. If Zach has another Teferi in his hand, I can definitely see this resolving, but if I were in his situation, I think I would start a fight over this. 6 mana looks like a Torrential Gearhulk, but Mike does have 2 mana, which is representing an Essence Scatter.
All right, we're going to try and do this the Gearhulk way. There it is, Torrential Gearhulk, and there's the Essence Scatter. Response over here.
Yeah, I mean, this looks like a really good spot for Zach to use this Disallow here. Because the Disallow allows the Torrential Gearhulk to resolve, which will add a 5/6 to the battlefield. And it'll let him flash back another Disallow on this cast out.
All right, so Disallow it is.
Which allow?
Disallow.
Exactly. Opts for the negate, makes sense. Disallow, generally, you want to save it for those situations where you don't have to use the negate, because it's it's a stronger target when you're flashing it back with Torrential Gearhulk.
All right, so Gearhulk in play at least for the moment for Zach here. There's a Teferi. Zach says, whatever.
Yeah, Teferi probably going to tuck his enemy brother inside of the library.
So how bad is this for Zach?
It's not too bad. He's generally going to have probably some Vraska's Contempts in his hand. So if this Gearhulk attack doesn't work, then he'll likely use one of those on the Teferi.
All right, he's being fumigated right now. Yeah, I do see a Vraska's Contempt in hand for Zach. And he will Contempt in response. Fumigate will bring Sigrist up to 21.
Definitely ahead currently. But yeah, with Mike only having 3 mana representing only 1 Disallow, this could be a spot for Zach to try and resolve a strong permanent like the Scarab God, which I think has been in his hand this entire game.
Yeah, it's been there for a long time.
If there was any opportunity, it would most likely be now, because then he can reanimate that Torrential Gearhulk, and potentially get another Glimmer of Genius.
All right, so Sigrist is going to take a peek at Alan's library here. There it is, the Scarab God.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Mike does not have a counterspell here, so this is going to be pretty powerful. Plus, Zach can also reanimate the Torrential Gearhulk at instant speed to also act as like a counterspell as well. And if Mike has a Disallow, then Zach can also reactivate the Scarab God, targeting that Torrential Gearhulk again. So many lines, Maria,
Yes.
so many lines.
So this Scarab God is really kind of blowing this match wide open at the current moment.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I believe Zach is going to be super patient with this because he doesn't want to be the first person to bite. Although, he does currently have a Glimmer on the stack.
All right, let's take a look here.
Looks like a Fatal Push into Teferi.
So we're going to keep that Teferi pushed to the bottom.
I believe Zach also afraid of Seal Away right now. That's why his
yes.
Scarab God is on defense.
On no fence, really. Zach Allen at Grand Prix Indianapolis, Team GP. His team got 5th.
Wow, so close.
Yeah.
Yeah, Seal Away and Settle the Wreckage, most likely why Zach is not actually attacking with his the Scarab God. And we have a Field of Ruin on a Field of Ruin. I definitely like this play from Mike because it protects his future as Kanta the Sunken Ruins from Zach's Field of Ruin. But Mike does end up net down 1 land.
Look at that graveyard.
Is this not enjoyable for you, Maria? Are you not
Are you not entertained?
Are you not entertained by the high-level control mirror in front of us?
It's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I definitely love it. All these tiny angles and, you know, just so many openings and mistakes that you can make in these kind of matches that I really enjoy when players navigate them well, and it's just awesome to watch.
Now I know the key, though.
What's the key?
Play more lands than my opponent.
Yes, play more lands than your opponent. And geez, since all of Zach's lands are foil, this is awesome to watch.
All right, we're going to try and blink of an eye this Scarab God.
Pretty sure Zach does not want to try and fight over this, but I can see him go for an activation on his Torrential Gear Hulk in the graveyard.
Okay, so here we go. Activation. Here's the Gear Hulk. Coming back smaller.
Gonna have a good old-fashioned stack battle here.
Stack battle. A battle of stacks.
So I believe the priority is currently on Mike on his... Oh, he's going to let everything resolve. And then untap. Most likely a Fumigate then? Or a Go, okay. Yeah, since this Gear Hulk is now exiled and in his eternalized form, I think I like attacking with it. Or not.
Zach Allen just going to pass the turn back here.
It's also possible that Zach understands that he's kind of in the driver's seat here and he has the best chance of winning this game, which means that, you know, if we do go to that protracted 50 minutes and have to go to time, he's going to have the advantage if he can win this game. Also, he might know that post-board, he's going to have a better shot to win.
There's commit to memory.
As Reed is reminding us on the card viewer, both players have a commit to memory in the graveyard, which can represent a whole new game, a whole new world, and a whole new place I never knew.
I don't want to go on that journey with you. Seriously, though, best of one?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost looking like this at this point.
Yeah, those commit to memories both being in the graveyard for both players.
Wow, that's interesting. I would not expect Zach to want to fight a Teferi with a counterspell here. Generally, I would imagine that he would have cards like Vraska's Contempt in his hand, just given how many cards of his deck he's drawn, and he does play 4 copies.
Interesting. Yeah, Mike Sigris might be happy about that. At least it might give him some information.
Yeah, so I think both players have used 3 disallows at this point, and have at least 1 more negate. Zach has 2 negate, and I believe Mike used his negate. I'm not sure, though. This has been a long game. Bear with me, Maria. I'm trying to be the expert.
Okay, here's Scarab God coming back once again, potentially. What happens if this is a draw for Zach?
Oh, in terms of standings?
Yeah.
I would believe that kind of locks him up for top 8 as well, because given the size of the Grand Prix, I would believe that X2-1 or 12-2-1 would be good enough to make the top 8. So if he were to go 12-1-2, that would most likely be good.
Ooh, was that the single Gideon in Mike Sigris' hand?
Possibly.
Gideon, get it done.
I don't like Gideon's chances on this board state facing down the Scarab God in a 4/4 Torrential Gear Hulk.
No. Mike Sigris on Team Channel Fireball has 8 Grand Prix top 8s, including 2 wins. Former Player of the Year, 3 Pro Tour top 8s to his name.
Yeah, Mike, very strong player, good friend of mine, and I don't think I've ever played him on the outside, but I would definitely be quite scared to go against him.
So you've kind of been behind the scenes for a bunch of these cards getting created that we're seeing on either side of the battlefield. Are there any that kind of stand out to you as having an interesting origin story?
So I arrived in R&D during the making of during the final development of Ixalan, so not a ton of cards here from that era, but I do remember having a hand in making Teferi and like discussing which abilities he should have. Originally, Teferi only had the draw card text, and we were trying to think of like flavor matching ways that Teferi could, like have an extra thing put onto it, because we were finding the Teferi without the untap 2 lands part at the end not powerful enough for standard. So we ended up adding that line of text, and I think it's worked out pretty well in terms of the power level that Teferi is currently acting at.
Well, Gideon tried to join the party, but it was not to be. Vraska's Contempt had something to say about that for Zach Allen. So how many meetings were devoted to Teferi design?
Not too many meetings, probably a fair amount of playtesting time. We like to play our Planeswalkers a lot just to make sure that we can get them, in the right space.
Sure.
Because there are so many knobs, is what we call them. Just basically ways to kind of tweak cards to turn the power level up or down. And Teferi is a card that we kind of tweak the knobs with a lot, but in the end, I'm pretty happy with the final result.
So now Mike Sigrist has a Search for Azcanta in play, and we're going to finally see something happen here with it. An immediate flip.
Yeah, and I do want to just remind everybody one more time that there are 2 commit to memories in both graveyards currently. Yeah, but this Scarab God and this Torrential Gearhulk are just kind of chipping away 1 point at a time, 1 scry at a time.
Yeah, I guess. Another Torrential Gearhulk in hand for Zach Allen as well.
And since both players have the commit to memory in their graveyard, the person who uses the first commit to memory will shuffle the other player's commit to memory inside their library again for a potential second use.
Mike Sigrist counting his library there.
Yeah, it's really important for both players to kind of keep in mind how many cards each player has, just to make sure that neither of them like deck each other, or they don't deck themselves more accurately.
Right.
Yeah, and Zach, what I believe to be correctly, scrying Lance to the top every single time.
All right, so Scarab God, here we go.
Hey,
Take
I mean,
one.
Scarab God and his zombie Torrential Gearhulk friend, just 1 point at a time. Yeah, and I think neither player really wants to try and resolve a draw spell either, given the library counts. Ooh, Mike drew his final disallow there, so he now has a counterspell ready in the chamber.
Really like this, what is it, the Invocation Scarab God?
Yeah, the Invocation Scarab God.
The one of Invocation Scarab
The one
God.
of Invocation Scarab God.
Nice.
So while we're watching this, I'll actually just start talking about their sideboards right now.
Okay.
So like I discussed earlier, generally the black control decks are slightly favored post-board because they have access to cards like Duress and Argwell's Bloodfast. And since Zach also has Glint-Sleeve Siphoner in his deck, it'll be a lot easier for him to snowball those post-board games. While Mike only has access to Lyra Dawnbringer and Baral Chief of Compliance as other ways to win the game. Yeah, and just Duress being the main draw to play black in your... Duress and Vraska's Contempt are pretty much the main draws to actually want to play black in these decks in the current environment. And as well, breakout card of the weekend, Argwell's Bloodfast.
This card has seemed excellent.
I don't exactly know how many cards are in each player's deck.
Not a lot. It was like 8 or something a couple turns ago when I saw Mike Sigrist kind of thumbing through his library.
It would be nice to get some confirmation from the floor to see how many cards are in each deck. We are asking for that right now. But yeah, we're reaching about the 30-minute mark in this game 1, and both players' decks are, I believe, sub 10 cards at the moment.
So overall, just a general question from what we've seen happening in this match, is this kind of like as far as this game one with these two decks goes, what you would expect to happen here, or like have both players played really well enough for this to be the state of the game?
Yeah, generally I think this is most likely how most matches will go. I believe there's a small % chance where Zach's deck can kind of outcard Mike's deck because of those Torrential Gearhulks and the Scarab God, and like try and mount some offensive and, you know, backed by counterspells, potentially protect those threats. And also, barring any sort of mana issues, this looks like a pretty normal game to me. Normal in the sense of normal for Esper control versus blue-eye control in the standard format.
Teferi here, negate from Sigrist, Torrential Gearhulk from Zach. Gotta count those lands.
Yep. These control mirrors are a lot about, you know, what kind of counterspells can my opponent have? How much mana do they have access to? Can they cast them all? How many disallows have they used? How many negates have they used? Big questions.
All right, very important to make sure you know how many you've got, lay them out properly. BDM is checking on these library sizes for us.
So I think currently the stack is Teferi with a negate on top of it,
and then
with a Torrential Gearhulk on top of that. And I think Mike is just trying to count his lands and make sure that, you know, whatever play he wants to make, he has access to.
Both libraries are under 10, both holding Teferi.
Yeah, and actually, if I'm in Zach's position, it's completely reasonable for me to just minus and put my own Torrential Gearhulk back in my deck. I believe Mike's lining up a Syncopate here.
So it looks like Zach's library might actually be 5 or under. So Sigrist, a few more cards in his library.
So I believe Mike is going for a Syncopate for 15.
Wow, that's the biggest Syncopate I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, it's just something I wake up every morning anticipating to say every day.
Just like, dreaming about. Syncopate for 15.
Pretty easy negate lined up here for Zach.
Well, I'll spend 2 mana.
Yeah. And Syncopate important on the Gearhulk because it actually exiles it, which makes Zach not be able to use the Scarab God activation on it. And I think Zach has one more disallow lined up or another Torrential Gearhulk. And I believe he's going to flash back that negate or a disallow. Yep, that negate on that Syncopate.
Wow, this stack is impressive.
Yeah, so I believe Zach is going to resolve his first Torrential Gearhulk, which was targeting that that Syncopate, and then the second one targets the disallow with the negate. And now I believe this Teferi is going to resolve.
100 years later, a Teferi hit the table.
And I believe he is putting his own Teferi inside of his deck.
Okay, so, all right, well, Sigrist still had a number of cards left in hand.
Yeah.
Didn't lose too many in that war.
But Zach does get to attack with his 4/4 Torrential Gearhulk.
Boom, down to 7 for Sigrist. All right, an attack, I love it.
And I believe there are 3 cards in Mike's deck and 4 cards in Zach's deck.
Oh, there's Teferi.
And I also think both players are just out of counterspells. Yeah, that is accurate. Both players 0 counterspells now. Everything is going to resolve.
We've got a Contempt here, though, from Zach on this Teferi.
Yep, that makes sense. I
believe
that Teferi was targeting itself as well.
This is great. The control players with no counterspells.
Yeah, it's kind of quaint, you know?
Quaint.
Actually, that Teferi was going after the Scarab God there. But all these Torrential Gearhulks on the battlefield, and it looks like Mike is out of Fumigates, too.
Okay, pass the turn back over to Zach.
All Zach really has to do is play around Settle the Wreckage by just attacking with one of these Gearhulks at a time.
All right, we're going to send the Zombie Gearhulk in, because that's the most scary. It's going to get sealed away here from Sigrist. But we very well may be making our way to a conclusion on this game.
I'm pretty sure a conclusion will be reached pretty soon. Wow, Mike activating his Search Res Canta. I believe he's just kind of looking at his deck. Oh, right, but neither player has a counter spell, so this Commit to Memory is just going to resolve.
Oh my god.
Which is going to send everything back.
This is absurd.
But another thing to keep in mind, since Zach has used these Torrential Gearhulks to flash back those counterspells, they have been exiled, while all of Mike's counterspells are just hanging out in his graveyard. And once that Commit to Memory goes off, then Mike will have all his counterspells and Zach will have less counterspells. Yeah, I believe Mike just kind of trying to set up the turn where he uses this Commit to Memory in his graveyard.
Okay, here's Teferi to tuck the Gearhulk. So one Gearhulk remaining for Zach. Vraska's Contempt on this Teferi.
And again, both players are counterspell-less until that Commit to Memory resolves.
Zach Allen, 28 life. Mike Sigrist, 7, but that is obviously not the whole story, as we are about to somewhat restart this game.
Oh.
Glimmer.
Glimmer of Genius, which will draw him one of those Torrential Gearhulks, and if Zach has another counterspell in his graveyard, he'll be able to counter Mike's Commit to Memory, and then Mike will have no cards left in his library. But if Mike has a Teferi in his hand, he'll be able to put that Teferi on top of his library. But on the other hand, I also think Zach has a Teferi in his hand, which can prolong the game. But yes, as Reed points out, Mike does have an Essence Scatter in his hand, so this Torrential Gearhulk that Zach is going to draw and attempt to counter the memory with will actually be countered by the Essence Scatter.
Oh my gosh. We were so close.
We were pretty close. Thank you, Reed, for pointing that out. Oh, and this is actually a Syncopate for a lot of mana. So that Glimmer is going to get countered, because I think Mike anticipated Zach drawing that Gearhulk.
There's Teferi from Zach Allen.
Plus, draw the Scarab God.
And there's the Scarab God.
And I think there's nothing really Zach can do to prevent this memory that's about to happen, because I believe he used all of his counterspells.
So yeah, Torrential Gearhulk will swing and knock Mike Sigrist down to 2, draws the last card in his deck. Oh boy, here we go. Commit to Memory. Go find it. It's buried somewhere in there. And let's do it all over again. Each player shuffles his or her hand in his or her graveyard into his or her library, then draws 7 cards.
Yeah, this was definitely bound to happen. And I believe this was Mike's game plan from the start too, because he knows that Zach has more win conditions and can just kind of disrupt Mike more often because of those Vraska's Contempts. That he kind of planned for this Commit to Memory to go off and win the game that way, potentially through decking. Not exactly sure.
All right, so a fresh new 7 for both players here, and all the lands they could ever want.
Zach did draw one of his disallows. This is
okay. That's pretty good.
This is pretty interesting.
It's kind of spinning the wheel a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike had to spin it, of course, but
Mike here probably with a handful of removal. I see a Fumigate, some Seal Aways, a pull from Tomorrow. And that may be the edge, too, in this matchup. Like, Mike does have that pull from Tomorrow, which could draw him a ton of cards, which would also lead him to deck faster. But, you know, if he can establish that advantage and maybe ult his Teferi, he can kind of run Zach out of threats.
it's kind of cool to have every draw, you know it's going to be gas.
Oh, wow, Zach ticking up.
All right, no fear.
Well, which
Teferi up to 6.
makes sense. Ooh, there's a pretty crucial Field of Ruin there.
Yep.
Since all of Zach's removal on Planeswalker is Vraska's Contempt, this memory does not shuffle the exiled Teferis back into Mike's deck, so it's possible that Mike is unable to actually perform the Teferi chain like he wants to.
By the way, Zach Allen's commit to memory was shuffled back.
Yes, he still has one available to him as well, but I will note that he has less counterspells available. This is probably a good chance for both players to kind of assess what they have left.
I thought you were going to say question their life choices, but yeah. This seems like a good time to question why I brought this deck to the tournament.
Well, they both have 11 wins.
All right,
so
all right.
that makes a lot of sense to why they brought this deck to the tournament.
That's fair. Yeah, Zach Allen with a draw. Mike Sigrist just 1 loss.
And I believe this is a disallow on a cast out that Mike is trying to cast. Mike will fight back with another cast out. We're going to target the Scarab God.
Okay, so that disallow are already used here from Zach Allen's hand.
Yeah, and that that cast out, that can't happen. The Scarab God is a legendary creature. Yeah, so it looks like this cast out is gonna end up resolving, and the Scarab God is gonna go underneath that cast out. Player is putting accurately representing the stack here. As you can see, cast down, destroy target non-legendary creature, and the Scarab God is quite legendary himself. So
oh yes,
not a legal target. Is that disallows just kind of chilling on the battlefield? Oh no, it's still on the stack. So
yeah.
the cast out has resolved. It's possible that Mike wants to try and counter this disallow to let the other cast out resolve to, and he did draw that disallow.
Okay, here we go.
So he can disallow this disallow to cast out the Torrential Gearhulk and theoretically run Zach out of threats.
And you mentioned how important it was that Sigrist had just access to more of these counter spells hanging out in his graveyard before the my brain is getting scrambled before commit to memory
exactly
came back, because Zach had exiled all his Torrential Gearhulks.
Yeah, so after all the dust is settled, Zach, all he has left is this Torrential Gearhulk, but looks like Mike has a handful of answers for it, so I anticipate this match going to time, at which point I don't think either player can win, because Mike really needs to try and get his Teferi going to ultimate, but that's going to be tough through all these Vraska's Contempts. I like that play from Zach, cast downing his own Gearhulk to potentially bring it back with the Scarab God if he wants to Teferi or forsake the Worldly this cast out.
Search for his Kanta here from Zach Allen. That Fumigate did not a lot of work, thanks to Cast Down. I remember at a Pro Tour in Hawaii the last time it was held that there was another control mirror kind of Pro Tour that we saw. It's pretty neat to see.
Yeah, definitely watching Shota Yasuoka play a control deck, always a treat.
Oh, absolutely. I watched him play an aggro deck at Worlds, this past Worlds, and never in my life seen somebody play faster Magic. It was unbelievable how fast he played.
Also, looking at Mike's hand here, he does have access to a disallow, I think. So, given Zach doesn't have any counterspells in his hand, Mike can kind of dictate which cards resolve and do not.
All right, Azcanta, the Sunken Rune, coming into play for Sigrist.
Yep, Mike now with 2 disallows in his hand. If he really wants to get a victory here, he's going to need to start getting this Teferi off and running. But given his record, I think he's also kind of content with a draw.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think both players are most likely content with a draw as well, as it means that they just need to win one more match.
Clock down to 3:36 here in game number 1, round 13.
Maria, you've been a real trooper in this match.
Thank you.
Hopefully I've imparted some control mirror knowledge to your future escapades in the control deck.
Well, there will be no future escapades, but I feel like I have learned quite a lot listening to you, actually.
I hope so. So in terms of Zach's path to victory here, he's definitely going to want to kind of get rid of that cast out that's on the Scarab God so he can reactivate and get back that Torrential Gearhulk that he cast down. So I think we're going to see a Vraska's Contempt on this Teferi.
Boom, Contempt. Disallow from Sigrist.
It's interesting here because Zach can also forsake the Worldly, this cast out on the Scarab God to instant speed reanimate that Torrential Gearhulk.
Yeah, and Mike Sigrist is at 2 life. And if we manage to get... Oh, boy. We got that Scarab God back in a zombie. That's 2 turns.
Yeah. So guess Zach kind of counting Mike's deck, seeing where he's at, wondering if he wants to go for this Forsake the Worldly on the Scarab God play. But it looks like he's going to go for it. Or it's just a Glimmer of Genius, potentially trying to find more counter spells.
Yep. Let's start with the Glimmer. Seems good. Top, bottom.
Fatal Push to the bottom, draws a Vraska's Contempt.
Get out of here, Fatal Push.
You have no legal targets.
All right, so the latest count we have is 10 cards left in Sigrist's library, 13 left in Allen's.
Yep, that makes sense why Zach went for that Glimmer of Genius, because he knows he's pretty safe in terms of just the general card count game.
All right, so here is Vraska's Contempt.
And I do see one more Disallow hanging out in Mike's hand. And if he does go for this, I think it's a perfect time for Zach to go for that Forsake the Worldly on the cast out play.
Oh, the clock is ticking. This is maybe the most important decision.
Yeah, and Mike also has that Searcher as Kanta activation available, or he's just going for a gigantic Syncopate here.
All right, there's Syncopate for Infinity.
Yeah, and
here it is, Forsake the Worldly. Cast out. That's holding back that Scarab God.
But I do believe Mike has the last Disallow. Is it the last disallow? It's maybe this. No, yeah, look, there are 3 of them in the graveyard right now.
Oh my gosh.
Mike has the last one sitting in his hand.
Players in the 1230 copper level up. Your pairing to now on the way to the board. Players in 1230 copper level up. Your pairings are on the way to round 3.
And that
Well,
will be time.
That was our out.
So, yeah, we are now on turns, I believe. It'll be turn 0 with Zach or Mike. I'm not sure. If we could get some clarification on that, that would be
There
great.
we go. Turn 1 here.
Turn 1 here. So Mike was turn 0. Zach now with 3 more turns to try and get the job done. Don't necessarily like his odds, but we'll get it done here.
Yeah, and there's no chance of a deck. Sigris just has too many cards left.
Yeah, both players just with too many cards left in their library.
Field of Ruin here. Take away that Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. Do you have any lands? Let's find out. Probably not.
Mike opting, both players shuffling 2 and getting a quick peek at what exactly they have left.
Okay.
Zach still has that commit to memory in his graveyard in his deck.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it again, Zach.
Yeah, so he can actually commit that cast out to potentially draw, to potentially activate that Scarab God
Sure,
again.
Sure.
Yeah, he'll most likely try for it with this Search for Azcanta, or no, he's just going for turns here, I guess.
Yeah, Field of Ruin, turn 3 here.
Both players waving their hands.
Yeah.
Saying go.
Go.
So I believe we are going to get a 0-0-1 draw here.
Wow. It was all for nothing. Well, they didn't get a loss. There's the handshake. It is going to end in a draw here. The players can't help but laugh a little bit. Esper control, white blue control. You know, we sat down for this match. We thought this might just happen. Zach Allen maybe a little bit exhausted after that.
That's exactly how I feel after that match.
Oh boy. Well, welcome back to the booth here. I'm retaining a few drops of my sanity.
Oh,
after watching that.
I'm completely fine. I love watching that stuff, and you know, imparting a little bit of information to you as well.
Yes, it was really interesting. A couple of interesting tidbits from Andrew there. If you didn't get to watch the whole thing on what it's like to play Control Mirror and some general tips for playing Control as well. But yeah, in the end, we weren't 100% who was favored, like after sideboarding this sort of thing, and it turns out neither. That's a draw for you.
Neither.
All right, we'll have more Magic after this. coverage of Grand Prix Pittsburgh. Round 13 was certainly one